Hey y'all, welcome to the Southern Appalachian Herbal Podcast. I'm Judson Carroll and I'm an herbalist. I'm also a wild crafter, a gardener, and herb grower. I'm coming to you from high atop the beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina, just a stone's throw from the Tennessee line, overlooking the Pisgah National Forest. Absolutely surrounded by the bounty of God's green earth. I spent most of my life wandering these mountains and learning about plants from the old-timers and all sorts of characters. On this show, we'll talk about herbs and how to use them, how to find them, how to grow them, how to make preparations. We'll talk about a lot of things. We can also talk about permaculture, homesteading, foraging, and living off the land. Most anything, really. You can email me at southernappalachianherbs@gmail.com if you have a question or a comment. You can also contact me through the Grow Network, where I'm a regular contributor and a moderator for the forums. And my blog is, of course, southernappalachianherbs@blogspot.com. All right, y'all. I'm going to sit my guitar down and let's talk about herbs. All right, welcome to episode 5. I hope everyone had a wonderful Thanksgiving and got to make use of some of those herbs I recommended in the last show. I got some real good feedback off that one. Today's show is going to be one I've really been looking forward to for a long time. I mentioned in my first episode, I learned from a lot of different people at different times and different places, and a lot of them in pretty unexpected ways, but one of the most interesting was, I guess I was about 15 or so, could have been 14. My mother and I were taking a hike in the mountains, and we took a wrong turn or 4 and ended up lost. And suddenly, up through the woods, came an older man, maybe 70, 75 years old, and we asked him if he knew the way back to the parking lot, and he introduced himself. And he said, sure, he'd be glad to help. He said, but if we went back the way we came, we'd never make it there before dark. But he knew another trail we could take, and we could get there more quickly if we followed him. Well, we did, and his name was Bill Devendorf. He was a retired park ranger, and he was still doing search and rescue. What a character he turned out to be. The first thing I noticed was that Mr. Devendorf was hiking. He was about my height. I'm 6'4". So I have a good long stride, but he was hiking at almost twice my natural pace. And sure-footed, never misstepped or stumbled, and talking the entire time. I mean, he was a talker. Did not get out of breath. The man was never once winded. We hiked together for at least an hour, and he told us all about how he had grown up. His father had been the groundskeeper at the Biltmore Estates. So this is like back in, I guess the 20s or so. Let's see, if he was about 75 then, yeah, this would have been, right around the time Biltmore was built into maybe around 1950. So he had a lot of interesting history in the area. But what was really interesting, I don't know if I or my mother commented about what good shape he was in. And he said he had always been in good shape. He said, in fact, he had never had, well, no, let me say this right, he had only had one cold in his entire life. Now imagine that. In 70 or 75 years, one cold. He started telling us about how his parents had raised him, and he said they followed the old German practices. And he said they always slept on an open screen porch outside, even in the dead of winter. They just put on more blankets. They believed in fresh air. Long hikes in the mountains. Swimming in cold water. They would swim in cold mountain streams, cold mountain lakes. Everything you could think of, he called it to toughen the constitution. They walked barefoot in the snow. Something sounded kind of extreme to me at the time, but it was interesting and it made sense. And they also used herbal herbs and home remedies. And that kind of stuck with me, I thought that was interesting. And, years later, I heard about the Wim Hof method. And if you're into health and such, you've probably heard about him. He's sort of a I guess you say, a guru figure of extreme sports and health. I think he's climbed Mount Everest in his shorts. He runs barefoot marathons. He exposes himself to extreme cold on a regular basis, and that's part of his whole method. And the more I looked into it, I found that was really a long tradition in German, Austrian, Swedish, really anywhere in Central Europe around the Alps, and in their tradition was periodic exposure to cold water, especially for health. And it turns out it all goes back to a man named Sebastian Kneipp. Now, before you get freaked out, the Wim Hof method is super extreme. Mr. Kneipp, well, it was actually Father Kneipp, he was a priest, never recommended the extremes in the Wim Hof method. Father Kneipp grew up in, I believe it was part of the Czech Republic at the time, and when he went to seminary, he developed tuberculosis. That was an incurable disease at the time, and he found a little book that recommended for strengthening the general constitution, taking regular, short baths in cold water. So he began taking 3 or 4 5-minute swims a day in the river, year-round. And his strength began to return, and his lungs began to get better. He shared it with a friend there at his seminary who was in worse condition than he was. I think the boy had only had maybe 6 months to live. I think it could have even been less than that, was what the doctors had said. They began swimming together every day. Both of them completely recovered from tuberculosis and went on to become priests. If this was 130 years ago or so, you would not need me to tell you about Father Kneipp. His book, which was published in 1890, called My Water Cure, was an international bestseller, one of the first true international bestsellers. I mean, it was even counterfeited and put bad translations in different languages. The book was so popular that unscrupulous people counterfeited it to make a quick buck. So he ended up doing a couple more translations, but they're all basically the same thing. A couple more versions. I mean, the last one was called My Will, but the contents of it are almost identical to My Water Cure. And in it, he gives his system of using water and herbs for all kinds of health conditions. And it's really, really interesting. Like I said, this is not that rigorous, polar bear plunge type of thing. He said, when you take a cold bath, no more than 4 or 5 minutes, and then get out. Put on your clothes, do 15 minutes of vigorous exercise or a brisk walk. He talks about more modest methods, such as walking barefoot in the morning dew, or a brief 4-minute walk in freshly fallen snow, or putting on a wet shirt and covering up in a blanket if you're an invalid, or even putting on wet socks and then putting dry wool socks over them and going to bed that way. Now, I know it may sound crazy to us in this day and age. We've been taught to avoid cold. I guess his only rival around 1900 for herbal medicine really worldwide was the Thomsonians here in America, who said cold equals death. But Father Kneipp's methods were far more widely world known and have outlived the Thomsonians now by 130 years. There are still very popular Kneipp spas in Germany where people come from all over the world for usually an annual spa treatment, and they just swear by him. I was speaking with a German lady just the other day that said every spring they go to the Kneipp spa and they take the cold water treatments, the herbs, and the diet. They take long walks in the mountains, and they say it helps their health just tremendously. They feel completely refreshed, kind of getting over the sluggishness of the winter and just ready for the new year. And I mean, they would not do without it. You can actually, you can go there from all over the world, or you will once they get rid of these COVID restrictions, and get certified in Kneipp therapy. And it's really neat stuff. But I wanted to introduce Father Kneipp to you. The first thing I've got to point out is people wrote so beautifully back then. People spoke beautifully. I mean, our education system has degraded, and probably popular culture as well. I mean, when you think about it, it has so degraded our use of language that to read a book from just 130 years ago makes our writing and speaking seem like a dog barking. I'll just give you a little hint from his introduction here. I'm not the best at reading out loud, so I'm just going to read a few lines. He says, "No two leaves of a tree are absolutely alike. Still less does the fate of any one human being resemble that of another. And were each of us before death to write down the history of our lives, there would be as many different biographies as there are individuals. Intricate and involved are the paths which in life cross and recross each other, sometimes resembling an inextricable tangle of which the threads are woven seemingly without plan or purpose. So at least it appears to our short-sighted vision, but it is not so in reality. The beacon of faith throws its illuminating rays into this dark chaos, showing how all these intricate paths have been designed from the outset by an all-wise Creator, to lead us to a fixed and determined goal. Wonderful indeed are the ways of providence. When from the watchtower of old age I look down upon the bygone years, and behold the intricate windings of my paths, I observe how these sometimes run apparently on the very edge of a precipice, only, however, to reissue thenceforth and conduct me against all hope to the sunny heights of my vocation, and I have every reason to extol the wise and loving dispensation of Providence, the more so as the road which, judged by human lights alone, seemed destined to lead me to a pernicious and certain death, has proved to be a source of renewed life to myself and to countless others." That's how he begins his book. I wish we still talked like that. Anyway, he goes on to tell that story of how he was able to recover for his illness. And then he talks about his water cure. And as I said, these are just brief exposures to cold water or walking in, on a cold, wet grass or brick floor, stone floor. And it's to toughen the constitution. And if we wanted to think about this from a more medical viewpoint, well, first of all, whenever you expose your body to cold, your body compensates. If you put your feet in cold water, the first thing your body's going to do is react and say, "Oh, look out, we're about to get frostbite here." So it starts pumping in some nice warm oxygenated blood to that area. That's good, for circulation and nerves. And I noticed before I started doing this, I was having a lot of nerve trouble in my right foot. I blew out my knee horribly about 2 years ago. I was under about 300 pounds of weight, stepped funny, and my knee bent sideways. I mean, bent in half sideways. I got up, I snapped it back into place. It swelled up, my knee swelled up about the size of a soccer ball and basically turned black. I mean, I was using a cane for about 6 months after that. Treated it with comfrey and turmeric for inflammation, and it healed up, Never had to go to a doctor. I don't go to doctors. But after that, I noticed my foot would fall asleep more easily, and I'd get a tingling in the sole. It would keep me awake at night. Really frustrating. So once I started doing these Knaip treatments, the first thing I noticed is my foot wasn't cramping up. My calf wasn't cramping up anymore. And I do attribute it to that flow of fresh blood, going to that area. And he also recommends walking barefoot as much as possible. And I think that helps a lot too. That helps with a lot of stuff. I mean, people will even say that because of electromagnetic fields, when we're wearing rubber soles, we're not discharging that energy back into the earth. And if you walk barefoot more, you are discharging that energy. Whether there's anything to that or not, I can't tell you. But I do think it has made a difference for me. But what was interesting, he also presented a very straightforward, common sense school of herbal medicine that everyone could use in their own homes. And this is what made his book far more popular than the cold water. I mean, a lot of people have a strong aversion to getting in cold water, and that's perfectly understandable. But his herbs really brought herbal medicine back to the forefront. And when we look at the world today, Germany is essentially the only country, at least that I know of, in the European Union, in the Western world, where the practice of herbal medicine is not only legal, but it's part of their conventional medicine system. I mean, you could go to a medical doctor with degrees, and they may give you a prescription, or they may give you herbs, and that's based in large part on Father Knaip. I'll read to you just a little bit from his introduction on his herbs section. He says that he has healed far more people with herbs than with water. Even though he believed water to cure just about anything, he had cured far more people with herbs. And also, speaking of interesting people from that region of the world, permaculturist Sepp Holzer is just well known to be one of the most vibrant, tough, strapping, just incredible men, and he attributes it all to the water, the rainwater that he collects and uses through a whole system of springs, and he has it aerating, and he says that when he leaves his mountain, he gets sick. When he goes home, he gets well and strong. So there really is, water has incredible powers one way or the other. But as far as herbs, I like the way he approaches this. He says, I am a sworn enemy of all secret remedies and patent medicines whose composition and ingredients are enveloped in mystery. This reproach cannot be addressed to me. I will willingly throw open the drawers of my pharmacy and invite everyone to analyze their contents. No expensive stock in trade will be found here, for most of my medicines, infusions, extracts, oils, and powders are drawn from simple weeds and herbs well known and much prized by our ancestors, but mostly now forgotten and despised. These may be found in almost every field and garden, on the common and by the wayside. And as this little work is chiefly written for the poor, the greatest merit of my remedies lies in their very cheapness and vulgarity. Vulgarity, by the way, means common. Comes from the Latin. Anyway, it doesn't mean, nasty or something. It is for the sake of the poor that I have devoted long years to this study, seeking out and renewing acquaintance with each obscure and insignificant herb, with a view of raising it anew to well-deserved honor and consideration. I have examined and analyzed, dried and dissected, boiled and tasted each over and over again. There is no herb, no powder whose effect I have not previously tried on myself before giving it to the world. And then, this is just a really nice passage. It says, how good is God towards us? My heart impels me to exclaim here. Not only that which we require for sustaining our life, our daily bread, does He cause to grow for us. In unerring wisdom He has created everything in perfect measure and harmony, and His paternal love makes countless little herbs spring up from the earth in order to bring solace and consolation to suffering mankind. How good is God, if only we had the sense to recognize it. Let us pursue attentively the little plants to which the Creator has given scent, as tiny perfume flasks by which to proclaim their qualities and attract our attention. And as we pluck them, let us render thanks to our Father in heaven, who provides so bountifully for His children. Like I said, I wish people still wrote and spoke like that. But he goes on to give what he calls a common pharmacy. He envisioned this in every home. He talks about how usually it would be the lady of the house that would keep these, and then she could teach their children, and recommends putting them in little boxes and teaching the kids to bring them out and combining them. He really set up a system of home medicine, which was what made this such a bestseller in the time. I'll just pick a few of the herbs he recommends. Some of them I've written about recently, and it's very interesting to see how he writes and finds uses that I was unaware of. Aloe, for instance. He says, this plant, which many people keep in their rooms by way of ornament, has thick, long leaves which are covered with prickly spikes. If everyone knew the value of these leaves, no home would be without at least one such plant. The leaf of aloe boiled in water will produce a medicine, a cupful of which will cleanse the stomach and bowels. Reduced to powder 2 pinches daily will act beneficially on the liver complaints and jaundice. A spoonful of honey boiled with an aloe leaf in a pint of water will, if taken in small doses, remove internal heat and heal sore gums, especially if these be the result of whooping cough. Mixed with wormwood, it serves to secrete watery saps which might otherwise have turned to dropsy. And here we take angelica. This is one of my favorite herbs. Upon damp meadows and in the woods, we find a plant which grows to the height of from 20 to 40 inches. It has a hollow stem out of which boys like to make pipes. The name of this plant is angelica. Its healing powers on the human system are unfortunately too little known. If anyone has partaken of poisonous or unwholesome food, a tea made of the roots, seeds, and leaves of this plant will be found an excellent remedy, as it tends to remove and secrete the unhealthy matter. How often we feel a sensation of cold in the stomach. A cup of tea made from these roots will quickly restore the internal warmth. It is best to imbibe such a cupful in 3 portions, to be taken morning, noon, and night. Flatulency and unwholesome gases in the stomach and bowels are readily cured by a cup of this tea, especially if the tea be infused with a mixture of wine and water. For congestion in lungs, windpipe, and chest, and for burning pains in the stomach, it is likewise very serviceable. The dried roots, leaves, and seeds may be reduced to a powder and thus employed instead of the tea. I'll just read you a few more here. This is fun. And people say they love learning about individual herbs, so I'll just read a couple more here. What we got? He's got arnica for wounds, camphor, chamomile. There's one everybody knows. Chamomile for colds, catarrhs. That's a word I have trouble saying. It basically means congestion, especially when these are attenuated by fever. For stomach pains, cramps, violent congestion, toothache is well known and a trusty friend in every German house. Less familiar to the English public will probably be the little muslin bags filled with dried chamomile flowers, which will relieve abdominal pain when applied warm on the stomach or abdomen. Coltsfoot. Now this is a good one, especially if you have respiratory problems. Many plants like the coltsfoot seem to have been created but to be trodden underfoot, but those who are acquainted with its qualities will hold this plant in high esteem. Coltsfoot tea is excellent for clearing and cleansing the chest and lungs, for coughs, and for all those inclined to consumption. Fresh coltsfoot leaves laid on the chest will draw out heat and fever, and may also be used for open wounds. They are especially serviceable for open sores on the feet, when the spots are highly inflamed, blue or black in hue. They draw out heat and pain and expel unhealthy matter. Also, for erysipelas, they may be used with advantage. Coltsfoot leaves may be dried in the shade, rubbed down into a powder, and taken as medicine. The dose is from 1 to 2 pinches, taken 2 to 3 times daily. This powder, like many others, may be mixed with the patient's food. I mean, just so simple. I mean, he made it just so anyone could do herbal medicine in their own home. And that's so important. That really, it needs to be our goal as we work as herbalists. You know, we're not going to be treating people like doctors. We're teaching people how to treat themselves. And he has a whole other chapter of illnesses and how he would treat them for instance, congestion. It says, an official thus complained, I suffer from difficulty in breathing, cramps in the throat, and violent headache. Sometimes I lay awake all night on account of congestion and pains in the head. For years I have not been able to go to stool without the assistance of medicine. Moreover, I have cramps in the chest, and when these descend to the abdomen I suffer great pain. I cannot protect myself from cold hands and cold feet, and my feet are invariably cold. My position in life would be a pleasant one were I not so continuously tormented by suffering. I have been to various watering places, but have found no help. My former stoutness has given way to emaciation. If water brings me no help, said the patient plaintively, then I am lost. The treatment I recommended was as follows: walking in wet grass daily, morning and evening, for a considerable time, which relieved him exceedingly, and diverted the headache. Twice weekly, a short swathing. That's where he would cover, like I said, like a wet shirt, for instance, or a wet towel. Once a week, a Spanish mantle. This was a robe they would put on that was wet. In order to promote stools during several days, a tablespoon of water be swallowed every half hour, and in case of greater inconvenience, a piece of aloe as large as a pea with half a teaspoonful of sugar dissolved in hot water, and likewise taken in spoonfuls half-hourly. Such simple cures, and I think really anybody can do this, and I highly recommend this book. Again, I said it's My Water Cure, written by Father Sebastian Knaip in 1890. And I think one of the most interesting passages, I won't try to read it, I'll just do it from memory, is when he says that in recent times, or again, remember this is 1890, that there was a fad of people saying you should either drink more water or less water. And how relevant is that to our times? I mean, you're always being told, drink 8 glasses a day of water, or don't drink this and do drink that. And he said, you know what? Drink when you're thirsty. Drink till you're not thirsty. Don't drink when you aren't thirsty. That's pretty darn simple. And I think one of the most interesting things, absolutely interesting. Again, remember this is 1890. He talks about how weak and unmanly the men of his generation were compared to their fathers. And that's why he recommended this, strengthening the Constitution for everyone, whether they were sick or not. And when we compare that to our era, when we know that men today have about 50% the testosterone levels that their grandfathers had, and we see the weakness of our society, boy, we need something to strengthen our Constitution. And, I guess the last thing I would say is it's also interesting. I think anyone who's studied herbal medicine or really anything, anything where people may be a little more on the left side of the aisle that are teaching it will hear a lot of statements against the church. They say the church outlawed herbal medicine. The church called it witchcraft. When the truth is the exact opposite. Not only was herbal medicine preserved and expanded through the Middle Ages, after the fall of Rome, before the French and English ever learned about herbal medicine as a science, other than just their folk cures. Perhaps the greatest herbalist of that almost 1,000-year period was St. Hildegard of Bingen. And here we see in 1890, the most prominent herbalist in the entire world was a Catholic priest from Germany. What outlawed herbal medicine had absolutely nothing to do with the church, not the Catholic Church or any church that I know of. It had to do with politics. It had to do with government policy. And far too often, people are very willing to assign blame to the church as opposed to governments. And whether that's from ignorance or outright religious bigotry, I cannot tell you. But, how often have you heard everything from slavery to the Holocaust blamed on the Catholic Church as opposed to the National Socialist government or the British Empire? No, the church didn't have anything to do with most of the things it gets blamed for. Government does, and a lot of people are just very hesitant to blame government because I guess they feel more comfortable trusting in government than God. Well, I don't. And that's one of the main reasons why I use herbs. Anyway, I hope you will really enjoy this. Look into it. I picked up my copy of My Water Cure off eBay for $3.99 used. So I think this one is well within anyone's budget, and you'll find maybe 30 or so herbs and how to use them that you can incorporate into your life, and your health will improve. And I really am a believer in the water cure as well. And if you give that a try, tell me how it goes. I think it's pretty cool. The information in this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any disease or condition. Nothing I say or write has been evaluated or approved by the FDA. I'm not a doctor. The U.S. government does not recognize the practice of herbal medicine, and there is no governing body regulating herbalists. Therefore, I'm really just a guy who studies herbs. I'm not offering any advice. I won't even claim that anything I write or say is accurate or true. I can tell you what herbs have been traditionally used for. I can tell you my own experience and if I believe an herb has helped me. I cannot nor would I tell you to do the same. If you use an herb anyone recommends, you are treating yourself. You take full responsibility for your health. Humans are individuals and no two are identical. What works for me may not work for you. You may have an allergy, a sensitivity, an underlying condition that no one else even shares and you don't even know about. Be careful with your health. By continuing to listen to my podcast or read my blog, you agree to be responsible for yourself, do your own research, make your own choices, and not to blame me for anything ever.